Hey guys, if you've ever wanted to know what I personally think about my photos, how I would change them, and the three things that I try to put in every single photo that I take, check out this video. Keep watching. Hopefully, it'll be worth it. So, to get started, we're just going to go through my website. I'm going to go through like one photo by one photo. I don't have way too many, but I have a decent amount. So, I'm just going to kind of hustle through them, tell what I like about it, what I don't like about it, maybe what I would change in the future, what I would change if I reshot it, and really try to emphasize those things that I try to do in every single photo. So all right, three things I try to put in every photo. We have foreground, subject, right there, and background. So in this photo, our foreground, it's not going to be as obvious of a foreground as my other photos, but it still leads into the photo and helps just direct your eye up. And that's really the purpose of a foreground in a photo, is to help direct your viewer's eye and also to help add depth to a photo. So in this photo, the reason why I'm kind of declaring this whole area right here as a foreground is because it starts pretty close to me and it leads into the rock where my subject is. You can also see, so I did a gradient on this photo going from dark to light from maybe like here to here. That was just because down here was bright enough where your eye would go up here and then it'd come down and go back up. So I did that, and that just kind of helps to guide your eye right back up to my subject there. All right, moving on. Okay, this photo, I swear, like, I'm the only one in love with it. It's still on my website, though, because I love it. I don't know. So, super stormy day in Bishop. We got a little break in the weather, so we decided to go out and climb. And the rocks were somehow like decently dry too. Um, in this photo, so I got foreground is all of this stuff, subject right there, background there. The reason why I did this as my foreground is because we have these, or I'll just tell you the reason why I did everything in this photo. So while we were walking, the rain, it washed all of like the dust and all that stuff off of the plants. So all the plants were vibrant and popping. I noticed my subject wore orange pants that day. And so to tie my subject into my photo, I I knew that I wanted one of these orange plants in it. And so the orange and the orange, those will kind of tie each other together. Um, the green in the very front of the foreground, the purpose of that, so the color of the plant that I chose was chosen because it's going to contrast my orange color of what's right in front of it. Um, and then also, there is nothing going on down here. So, in turn, we have all this random detail, and detail is what our eye is going to be drawn to in our photo. So, by blocking out that entire section there and this section right here with that green plant, it creates a bit of an empty space where it's it's not necessarily supporting, but it's detracting less. It's kind of simplifying our photo and just eliminating those random things that are gonna pull your eye away from your subject and things like that. Um, if I did it different, I'd probably make this whole area a bit darker. I feel like my eye is being drawn down here where it should be in my subject. And I'd also probably dodge and burn the boulder a bit just to give it a bit more shape. Also, just by selecting this boulder and making a selection mask, I think you could probably really pull it out and kind of stretch out the image going from like front to back and really give it some depth just by some dodging and burning techniques there. Yeah, this photo, it's like kind of a fan favorite, I guess. Like probably the photo that I'm most known for taking. Uh, so first of all, just to take this photo, I woke up in the morning in the back of my car, and I was parked right here. There's actually a car there, and I had to take it out of the photo because there was someone sleeping in it, and so there's just nothing I could do to remove that except for in post. Um, yeah, so I was sleeping right here. I woke up really early in the morning, just from the sun light hitting the tops of the mountains and also bouncing off the clouds. And I looked out my window and just saw this light kind of coming down the mountains. And I was like, oh, okay, like this is the time to shoot this photo. It has to happen in the next 5 minutes or else it won't happen. So jumped out of my, like, rolled out of the back of my car, a little Honda Element, and grabbed my camera bag, ran over here in bare feet. This is actually a big panorama photo. It's actually not that big, so I maybe take 4 photos across, each overlapping by a third to a half of the photo, and then maybe 3 photos down, maybe 4 photos down too, just overlapping a ton again. The reason why I did that in this photo is just to separate, well, actually, the real driving reason behind that was that my 14 millimeter lens is a Rokinon lens, and honestly, it just does not have the best color or contrast. But I had a 24 to 35 Sigma Art Series lens, and I love that lens. Like, the contrast and the colors are incredible. So I figured instead of taking kind of a cheap looking photo on a cheap lens that was the right focal length, I might as well just take a panorama with a bit tighter of a focal length and still achieve everything I wanted to, but get better color and contrast. So that way it'd just be way easier to edit. Another reason why, or really, I guess 2 other reasons why I do those panoramas is, first of all, you're going to get a bigger depth of field, because if you shoot this entire panorama, let's say f4, and then you merge it and it's like 3 photos up, 4 photos across, you're going to end up not with really an f4 photo, but more like an f2 photo. And at 14, if any of you have really like shot it that wide of a focal length much, you'll know that everything is going to be in focus. From like your foreground to your background, unless you're really close, and you can see just how far away ish I am here, everything would be in focus from here. And so by shooting it at a tighter focal length, and I probably shot this at f2.8 also, I was able to fake a much wider aperture. And that's just kind of like a random creative effect / creative byproduct of making a panorama photo. Another great reason is if you do want a shallow depth of field, but you want it to be really, really sharp, you can take like an 85 millimeter lens, stop it down to f4, f5.6, just whatever, and then take a panorama, and it can still look like it was shot at f2.8, but just on a much wider lens. So you can kind of mimic like a 24 millimeter lens with an 85 by just taking a ton of photos. And then you also look like you shot it at f.5 aperture. So that'll be kind of interesting. Overall, with the framing of this photo, I wanted her near the center, so that way your eye just kind of drawn into her. I put the boulder overall, it's kind of on that upper right third line is right here. So I wanted it generally on that, but a little bit inside of it. So as you can see, the entire, like the center point of the boulder is almost at that imaginary line there. I typically put subjects inside of that third line just because I don't know, I just think it looks good. Personal preference there, honestly. Let's just move on to the next photo. I don't have too much to say. Okay, this photo, I saw this bush, and honestly, all I really have to say about it is I wanted a foreground that kind of just was the bottom and then like spiked out in every direction, and this bush was perfect for that. As far as I framed the boulder, I was going to put it in the very center, but I felt like the photo was overall more balanced if I put it slightly right of center. So that's what I ended up doing. I think this is also a panorama photo too, but just with 2 photos, one taken down here, and then one taken up here. I already kind of talked about that photo, but overall I'm kind of going for kind of an overall sense of symmetry where we have this almost pattern of a pyramid-like structure there, kind of a pyramid-like structure there, and then the light just breaks that and then also helps separate this rock from that background. If you're looking at this light, you can see how the rock really blends in pretty well in this area. And that's what really made the photo happen here, was just this line where it gives you a real sense of depth between this rock here and that mountain there. And it really just like helps show the full scale of everything, I feel like. This photo I only like because it's two climbers climbing at the same time. That's it. Yeah. Okay, this photo though. So I actually took this forever ago, like 2 years ago, maybe more, 3 years ago. It's my buddy Austin. It was an overcast day, so the sun is it's kind of obviously faked or fake. This was a bit newer in Photoshop when I didn't really know how to make the most realistic of effects. I can add them decently seamlessly now where a lot of people can't totally tell, but this one, it's obvious, like, okay, there's fake light, but I still like it. When I was framing it, I saw this rock here, so I was like, okay, that's going to be, okay, so to start off, all the trees above, that boulder's there, this rock was here. I kind of just saw that as we walked up, and I was like, okay, well, that is a leading line because it kind of like loops in almost to just, it's essentially drawing your eye from the right side of the image to the left side. I liked the trees up here, aiming it that high, because it almost just adds a cap where if you couldn't see that, I don't think it'd be as good. Your eyes just kind of like go up, but then they almost don't want to stop. So by having that line of trees there, it just gives your eyes like, you're like, oh cool, there's subject, there's the sun, and we're at the top, so let's go back down to our subject. And it kind of helps just guide your eye back down by putting that cap on the top. If I were to do this different, I would have probably gone a bit closer to this line here, so that way it might point a bit more towards him. And overall, I'd probably just try to shoot it in better conditions where I didn't have to use Photoshop as much to create an interesting lighting area. Okay, this photo I'm going for a pattern on, kind of. So I just have those two lines there kind of sloping up and right, and then just a boulder there. There's not really much to say about this photo, I guess. I was going for simplicity when I shot it, and that's about it. I'll just like put her in the center near the bottom, and yeah, show some layers in there and really create some depth. And yeah, that's honestly, that's all I have to say about this photo. Just simple. Yeah, that one's great. What is... Alright, well that one's not showing up, but this one was an interesting one. So I've typically seen it shot from over here, and they kind of shoot it this way. But right when I was looking for an angle to shoot this, I just made a huge loop. So I kind of looked around that normal area, and then I stood there, looked around, noticed that there were some rocks, which is where I took this photo from, and I was like, oh, yeah, you'll probably be able to see the climb from there, so that's a possibility. And I kind of just listed that in the idea bank of possible areas to shoot from. After that, I walked out to a few different areas, and then overall decided this one was going to be the best because you have interesting rocks there, and then just this little mountain peeking over, which helped add an extra sense of depth to our photo. while I was also shooting, a bunch of birds were flying around, so I made sure to nab a photo of that. The bird was actually over here, but I moved it over here in the photo just because if my subject was here, that little mountain was here, and the bird was here, there would be no reason to have a right side of this image. But without the right side of the image wouldn't be balanced well. So therefore, by putting a bird there, it adds a weight to the right side that's going to make that side of the photo somehow useful and a bit more pleasing to the viewer's eye. That's a bit more of a theory than anything. That's just like what I personally kind of think my viewers might subconsciously do. I know that like no one who looks at my photos actually thinks of any of this stuff. This is just the weird amount of thought that I like overthink when I'm editing. But yeah, just balance. That was the idea of putting that bird there. If I shot it again, I might try to get a bit farther right, so that way this mountain would be right here, and I think that would balance out our photo better. That's about it on that one. This photo is also a panorama. That arête isn't as tall as you'd think. So the reason why I look so tall is because it's slightly overhanging, so it kind of comes towards me in the photo. And I shot this photo at 35, I think, 35 millimeters. And so because I shot it, it took a photo down here and then took another photo up here. It kind of stretched that arête up above me, and it made it appear taller without it actually being that tall. It's maybe 20 feet to there. Maybe probably less, actually. I think it's less to there. It's like 16, 15. I don't know. When I shot this, I was honestly just experimenting. Like, I didn't totally know what I was doing, so I'm just gonna move on to the next photo. Okay, this photo, the thing that no one knows about it is this entire part of ice is backwards. So because there was no real detail in, let's see, I can't remember if it was that line right there or this line right here that I was going off. But since there's not really any detail in there, I was like, okay, I can just do a lasso kind of through that area, kind of avoiding these chunks of rocks, and then select the rest of the bottom, flip it, and then all of a sudden, instead of my ice pointing over here and just everything coaxing your eye to the right side of the photo, now with all these lines pointing down and right, which I kind of like because it follows his line of sight. Whoops. It follows his line of sight, kind of gives a direction to the photo, but then as your eye comes down from the subject and over to the right, and it hits this ice and you look at that, that's just going to force your focus kind of back over to the left side, and it's just kind of like a circle, I guess, is the way that I've always read this photo, where it starts here, goes down here, down, and then straight over here to the left. Okay, this photo, I love it. I don't know why. It has a lot of negative space. So I think that those lines are probably from something with how the shutter delays when you take a long exposure or longer. I have no idea though. I wonder. I think it's something to do with the shutter, but I used a faster shutter there, so I guess I can't really imagine it being something with the shutter. I don't know what that would be from. Overall in this photo, there was dark space all down here, and it didn't support the photo at all. And then also with his red and blue, I didn't have anything to contrast that in the rest of the photo because it's black and orange. And so if I didn't have the green in there, it'd be overall pretty like monotone, I guess. Lots of red tones, lots of orange tones, and then just little like hints of blue. But by adding the green in there, now we're contrasting our reds and oranges somehow, or with something. And it's also helping to fill all of that like just dead void empty space. I like the empty space up here because your eye will go up there, but then it just comes right back down. And so your eye's not like fighting, like your subject's not fighting for attention in your photo here. We also have like some leading lines coming this way, just pushing your eye back over. But also just by making, also another random thing that I did here, we had an extra light, and so I put it way over onto this side, so that way it kind of illuminate just a tiny bit of detail over here, but I ended up scratching that because I liked the loss of detail. And then I took an iPhone flashlight, and that's what's creating the light on these plants right here. It's just a little iPhone flashlight held next to my camera, like a bit out in front. And that was just to add a little bit of color to my foreground, again, with the color contrast in mind. That's me in this photo. So I just did a big panorama around. Again, this photo is supposed to just be simple. And honestly, it's just kind of a photo that makes me psyched to get outside. Like, one of my favorite places, me climbing in it. Happy vibes going through the photo. So yeah, honestly, when I shot it, all that I was trying to capture was the setting, and that was Taos Field below, trees behind, and then just like mountain views in the distance with this golden glow during sunset. And yeah, that's all that I was trying to capture in this photo, and that's exactly what I got in this photo. Really just showing off, like, this is why I love this area. It is beautiful. That's it. Yeah. All right, so this photo, the angle was kind of... Who came up with that first? Okay, so me and my friend Bruce shot this at the same time. So we kind of would just bounce between angles and then like go and like steal each other's angle. I can't remember who went down onto this little like rock here first, but essentially the reason why one of us did that is that if we were on top, there wouldn't really be anything supporting our photo in this bottom left side, but by adding this dark foreground there, so your eye is going to be drawn overall to a brighter part of the photo because that's just what is going to be asking for attention. So by putting a darker foreground in down here, and it kind of matches over there. So first of all, I like how the bottom left corner and then almost like the top right corner, they kind of complement each other in tones, and then you just have this whole middle and then top part to contrast those really dark tones. If I had to re-edit it, I'd make this whole area darker because I think I must have dodged that too much. We also use this foreground because it leads straight to the climber, and it has a dope background, so it just kind of asking to be shot, I guess. There's not much else to it. This photo was meant to just kind of like contrast itself in a lot of different ways. So we have a predominantly orange bottom here, like in the rock and skin tones and all of that. And then the top of the photo is very blue, so that's going to contrast. And then I didn't put this part in, obviously, because I can't make trees. But, yeah, the reason why I shot it from this angle was the climb points this way, the flat iron points that way, so they're kind of like crisscrossing each other. And then there's a green strip in the middle, so then to kind of tie that into the bottom of the photo, I put a green foreground in, so that just kind of like helps make the photo look simpler, even though a little bit more is going on. The reason why I put things in front of the lens like that all blurred out is because nothing is going on behind them. I don't need my my audience to look there. I don't want them to look there. It's just a distracting area. So by covering it up, I don't have to worry about anyone looking down there anymore, and it's hopefully going to just direct their eye right over to my subject a bit better. If I shot it again, I noticed in post all of those clouds were blown out, and so they look terrible to me. But overall, I like how the edit came out. Okay, this photo was also Photoshop. So this rock right here and this rock right here were cut out in post, and I think they were moved to the right and made bigger. I think. I also might be thinking of a different photo, because I also have a photo of someone on Resident Evil, not on Black Lung, from almost the same angle. And I know that I did Photoshop on that one, but I can't remember if I tweaked this one very much. Overall, I was just kind of trying to get my lines to go the same way. So we have, when I really look at the photo, I see one main line diagonal here and then another good diagonal right there. So kind of the entire photo is just leading the same direction. My intent with it was for your eye to kind of start here and then just to kind of track this area, but never really stay too long up here or down here, but just go there, like kind of look up here, look down here, look there. Yeah, I don't know. Just meant to direct the eye. So by putting all right, so I actually do this in a lot of my photos. I'll put something that is supportive in the environment, but doesn't really have detail, like a sky. So I put that there because I knew it would help give the photo depth by putting a background to it, but not have any detail as to distracting the climber. And then for my foreground, I used a wide aperture, so that way it would also kind of get rid of the detail, which would be distracting to my viewer's eye. And so because that doesn't really have any detail, it's not going to capture your interest as well for the viewer, or at least that's the hope of it. So I'm really just hoping that viewers' eyes staying in that whole diagonal section there. This one, I just saw this rock and was like, yep, I'm going to frame it. I'm going to frame this huge boulder inside of this weird little wave in the rock. That's all it is. That's also me in the photo. I positioned the camera, had my friend take it out of my hands without moving it at all. And then while I was on the climb, I just kept saying, okay, and now. And I just tell her, here's the move that I want. Just hold down the shutter while I'm doing that move, and I'll just take one, pick one from there. So some people have some moral issues with that, where they're like, oh, well, who really took the photo? Flat out, I took the photo. I don't really care what anyone else says. I know that my friend pushed the button on it, but they have no rights to this photo. It's not their photo. It is my photo. I framed it. I told them what move I want. Everything creatively that went into this photo is me. So I know that a lot of people kind of wonder, well, oh, isn't it who pushed the shutter that it's their photo? No, it's whoever did the creative work in the photo that it's their photo. Pushing a shutter doesn't mean anything. That's about it in that photo. I wanted to make sure that I still had some of the wall behind. And by even just putting that tiny bit of wall there and then even smaller bit of wall there, now I have 4 layers to my photo. So I have foreground, which frames up me, and it kind of helps direct your eye with all these leading lines, puts you right there. This line, I feel like, just draws your eye from the bright spot kind of back down, and then it almost just swoops right into me with that little, at least that's what my eye does personally. Yeah, so we have those 4 layers. We have foreground, we have subject, which is me on this boulder, we have that cliff wall in the background, and then we have the sky. More layers, I think, really makes for a more interesting photo overall. I wore all blue because it's all orange there, and the blue would help me kind of tie me into the sky, which would help tie me into the photo. And something about just looking or like having something to tie you into your environment or tie your subject into your environment, I think is huge. So that's a lot of times my foreground selection and my subject's clothing selection. If I have a choice on that, I'm just trying to tie them into my uh gosh, words are hard right now. Trying to tie them into the rest of the environment. And that's all. Either tie them into it or contrast them from it, I should say, actually. Okay, this photo, I like it a lot. It's just, it was a great day. Like, stormy, moody, good company, awesome time, like awesome sends going down. It was pretty tight. I cannot tell you the location because it's a secret, but when I was taking this photo, I was like, okay, we're way up here on a hill, so I'm going to shoot out from the hill because I don't really care about the hillside. It's the view that looks cool. So with an area like this, I'll always try to capture the view before I try to capture anything else. If I were to shoot it again, I would probably head up and left this way and shoot it with an 85mm lens going more down the rock. So that way you'd see more facial expression and then get more of the background this way, because I also remember that being cool. But just being able to see a facial expression will really help boost a photo, and you can't see that in this photo. So that kind of bums me out. But I still like it. Like, I put my subject on the left, and then I thought these trees were kind of cool. So I put those on the right because they're like kind of short and cool. That little bit of foreground, that was just the tree that I was standing next to. If I were to reshoot it, I would take it out because I think that the detail in these trees isn't as distracting as it is maybe interesting. But I'm also not in that environment right now, and I can't totally tell how distracting that might be back there. So maybe I was right in putting that foreground there. This one was just basic. I just stood up on a log and took it. That's all. This photo was from the same trip as the photo 2 photos ago in that secret spot. Okay, so the thing I love about this photo is it's one of the most real photos I've ever taken, because he's actually putting up a first ascent, like on the send of a first ascent in this photo. If you zoom in on it, I wonder if it'll have, okay, you can kind of see it. So there's snow. It's like just about to start blizzarding. And he was like, yo, let's go get some photos on this boulder. I've been working on it. I'm pretty close to it. And then he just goes and like fires it off and sends it. So I was incredibly stoked to have captured that moment. You can kind of see all my layers here. I've got foreground, this little layer of trees right in front of him. So almost like 2 layers of foreground. Then I have him, those background trees, and then even more of a background back there. I experimented a little bit with zooming in more, but I really felt like having that area up there just added a depth, and also really helped tie in the fact that, like, hey, we were in a snowstorm here. Like, it wasn't warm. I was really trying to pull out those cooler tones in my photo to just really sell the fact of, like, it's not warm. It was very sendy when he sent this, because, and yeah, it was blizzarding. When he was on the arete, I was like ready for his foot to pop from the wet or something. But it was such a cool experience to shoot that one. This photo I really love, but I also really hate because there was a really obvious change that I would make. First of all, I have no idea what I was doing with this foreground. Like, it doesn't help. It detracts. It's ugly. You don't know what it is. It kind of looks like a finger, a green finger one in front of the lens, I guess. If I were to retake this, I would have tried to hold the camera up higher So that way we'd have a bit more separation between these two boulders. And then I'd also probably try to separate that boulder from that background a bit more. Just with the use of like dodging and burning in post-production. If I could, I'd maybe try to find like a rock to put in front of the lens that would just cover up this area right here. Really just because it doesn't help the photo. It doesn't need to be there, so I don't want it to be there. And that's what I was trying to do with that foreground, but I don't know, I must have been like really tired, or I think my stomach was hurting a lot that day too. I remember I was pretty sick that day. Again, with this photo, I don't love that little bit of foreground, but if that were more down here, I'd be okay with it. What I was trying to do is just block out that side of the photo there. And then as far as framing goes for this photo, much like a lot of my photos, I was just trying to show off the environment. Ugh. Yeah, so I was just trying to... Yeah, so with this photo, much like a lot of my other photos, I was just trying to show off the environment around my climber. I think Joe's Valley is beautiful, so these walls right here hills with a wall on it in the background, I knew that I wanted those in there because that would help kind of add to the depth of it. And so again, foreground, subject, background, we have those 3 layers there. It's going to pull our photo apart a little bit and create a little bit of depth and interest there. Oh, by the way, if you haven't caught on the way that I organize all my photos on my website, they go from my widest shots where my subject is the smallest to my tightest shots where my subject is the largest. And I did that because I'm a bit more known for my wide shot, so I figured I might as well just organize it by that, and you kind of have like a clean run through on my website. This photo is totally fake. That is not there. It is actually up here a little bit more. When I shot this, again, I was just trying to get the environment. I was kind of like, what would capture this environment really well? So I took 2 shots. I showed you one shot earlier where I was like, oh yeah, like I really like this shot. I feel like no one else does, but I do. So that shot of just that huge boulder with the girl on it, I feel like that one I was really going for the color of the environment. This one I was trying to go for like the drama almost of the grandeur of the environment, where you have this big boulder that she's climbing, and then I use my foreground here to block out everything down there because it wasn't really supportive. Other than the pads, it would be cool to see the pads in this one, so maybe like shoot it a bit higher next time. And then this mountain here, I took a separate shot like just right after I took this shot, and I probably cut it. What was that? I probably cut it like right in here somewhere, just below those boulders, but I also may have cut it in here. I can't really tell. But yeah, so I cut that. This hill actually is way bigger than that. It just keeps going up. But to be able to show off the environment and fill my frame in a way that my subject wouldn't be too small or the boulder wouldn't take up too much of the photo, I had to pull the mountain back down into view. So that's kind of like my reasoning for changing my environment there, is I was just pulling whatever I thought interesting into my photo. This one's also pretty straightforward. Just whenever I'm just trying to get a shot, I'll kind of like look at the climb, figure out, it's usually the shape of the climb. But in this one, it was more just you couldn't shoot it very well from any other angle because of how many trees there were. And then threw a foreground in, have my subject, and then yeah, you can kind of see behind them. But I like this photo, but I don't know why. I think it's just a tones thing, and also like the green to the orange contrast is nice with the blue hint in there. Also, it's very real. Usually I don't have that many people in my shots or like clutter or things like that, but in this shot I didn't Photoshop anything out, so that's different. This photo is a panorama. I took a photo down here, a photo right here with my subject in it, and then another photo up here. Very largely overlapping for those. When I was shooting it, so I actually have another shot of this too where you can see the stream over here, but I also wanted one where, since it was a roof, I just wanted to show off like this pose or this movement, I guess. I thought it was kind of interesting because it's not like a starfish, but it's not like a stick. It's actually moving, and like her hair is kind of swishing. So I just kind of felt like this was a good angle to capture the body position from. Whenever I'm looking for angles, the main things I'm going to look for are, is my environment interesting? Like, is there something I want to tie in? Is there a cool plant I can put in my foreground? Is there a cool mountain I can throw in my background? Like, what is there that I can work with here? Second, I'm going to look at my climber's body positions. Typically, I'm going to want my climber almost moving towards me for the shot, because then you have a better chance of getting a facial expression in. And for that step, whenever I'm shooting, I just have my climber climb the climb and watch what they're doing, and then I'll just pick a move that I personally like, figure out which way they're looking in that move, and then I'll just go in that direction and shoot back at them. And yeah, you can usually get a decent angle from that. I don't really know if I would change anything in this photo, actually. Maybe flip that chalk bag around so you could see the organic logo, but I bet that's about it. This photo, okay, so I've shot this climb a ton, and then finally I was like, well, let's just try to find a new angle on it. And so instead of shooting it from over here to the left, looking this way, kind of out the canyon, I noticed that we could still get a few layers in over here. So I put this bush as the foreground, again, because there's so much orange in this environment that I need something to contrast that. Since there's already like little green bushes, I was like, okay, a green bush, that's going to contrast the orange really well. And then the blue shirt, I actually made him wear this shirt. It's one of my shirts, but I made him wear that because that would tie him to the ground, and it's decently contrasting to orange. So it'd help him stand out a little bit. What I was kind of going for in this photo is just like, let's see how many layers I can create or pull out of this environment in one shot. And so that's what I did here, is just like layer, 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 layer. Lots of layers. I have no idea how I shoot sport climbing or how to shoot sport climbing. So for this shot, I just went like way back up a hill that was kind of next to the climb and shot in that direction, and chose this move just as she was climbing it, because I was like, oh cool, yeah, she's kind of facing me and you can see her facial expression in that, so let's go with that. And then I chose this position on the hill because you'd still have a gap of sky there. If we didn't have that, the photo would have a lot less depth, I feel like. And I don't know, I really enjoy depth. That's about all that is. This one I'm just trying to get the body position. That was shot at a competition. This one I liked the way that wood right there looked, and also just you can kind of see like his eye and then the hand in motion. I love like that hovering hand over a hold, because with guys you can't, unless they have long hair, you can't really get that sense of motion as much. So if you have that hand hovering, you can see that's like, oh, like they're moving in the photo. It'll just add another element of movement, and that can help increase how interesting a photo is. This one was really interesting because the background's actually up here. It's all one shot, but I separated her from the background and then just moved her up on it. Her head should actually be like here in this photo. But again, I just want to show off the environment, so I moved her up in the photo to show off the clouds, the mountains, all of that, just like sunrise type setting that we had there. This one I just wanted the wall to lead into her, and then all of these lines are pointing at her from that left side. I made the bottom here darker just to direct your eye back up here, and also this wall darker to, again, pull your eye back in this direction with the use of leading lines too. I also made up here a bit darker to, yeah, pull your eye back to my subject. This photo, honestly, like, I'm not going to say much because it's not really, it's not my angle. I wish I shot it different. It's the angle that like everyone else shoots on it. The reason why I don't like it is because it kind of looks like his leg is just coming out of his head almost. When you compress someone's body like that, I don't think it's a great look. So if I would have backed up a bit or gotten a bit closer to the wall, it would have added depth to the photo by seeing, like by having his torso lead from his head to his legs. It just create an extra sense of depth there. This photo I shot a long time ago, and honestly, I was just experimenting with a long focal length, which I shot this at 200 millimeters. I hadn't had a 70-200 before, so I was like, yeah, why not? Let's check this thing out. And so this photo is really just experimenting with throwing my background out of focus. Another thing I did in this photo is my 70-200 at the time had a ton of scratches on the front element, and I noticed that if the sunlight hit that, it would add a really cool haze. And then in Lightroom, I also found that if I just boosted the dehaze by like 50, it'd sharpen it all right up. So you can't even really tell that there was much of a haze over this when I started, but there was an insane haze over it. Like, I was surprised that I was able to fix it. Overall, though, I knew I'd get kind of some just creative out of it, but I really like how it turned out just because of how soft the photo is. Okay, this photo was kind of interesting because I was experimenting with apertures and how it changes my foreground. You can see right here how we have texture in my foreground. I don't know exactly what that was coming from, but it was something how the light was hitting the foreground, and then I stopped it down to just f4 because I was trying out like f2.8, f5.6, f8. I thought that f5.6 was too much detail in my foreground, where it started drawing your eye to it, and then f2.8, it was just a blur. And so I found that at f4, it just give like almost a texture to this tree here. It's kind of like furry. So I used that to frame him up because there wasn't really anything going on down here other than like a pad there. And then also, again, he's like, okay, skin tones, they're more orange, so I use green to contrast that. And yeah, and then again, like, looked at my subject, I was like, okay, where does the climb go? Like, how does the movement go? And he described this move to me, and I was like, okay, cool, easy, like 85 millimeters, shoot it from this direction, and we'll get a facial expression, maybe some little bit of try hard. He's like a beast though, so not too much try hard. I thought, okay, I actually have a newer photo of this that I've re-edited, so I'm not going to talk about this one because I have a newer one. I don't know where it is, so I don't know if I will talk about it in this video, but essentially the newer one is just a different body position where it's a left-hand move, and I just kind of liked the way that that when she used her left hand to cross over, I liked the way that opened up the rest of her body to kind of lead you back into the background. All right, this is the last photo and another of my favorites. So this photo, I was kind of looking around and didn't really see much interesting. It's kind of in a pit, but I noticed a bush right behind it, and I was like, okay, well, she's wearing a orange hat, red leggings. There's kind of red in the pads, so let's use green to contrast that. At first, I was using my foreground in the lower part of my photo like I usually do, because typically when you're thinking about plants and stuff, they're going to be lower. So it's always been kind of obvious to me that you would put that lower in the photo. But in this photo, I like the fact that you can see her pad, and that her pad it ties into her legs, or like her leggings, those So Ill, like red leggings. Without the pad there, I feel like the leggings are just a bit more like, oh, like they just pop more, but in a distracting way, where your eye's like, wow, those are really red. Then when you add that pad in there, I feel like your eye just goes more up here now, because the red is now tied into the photo somehow. Another reason for having that pad in there is, so one thing that I learned by shooting mountain biking actually was that if you don't give your subject a place to go, it's going to create some sort of like conflict in your viewer, where they're like, ooh, like, what are they about to hit? Or like, oh, if they fall, where are they going? Like in a climbing sense. So I've been trying to show my pads more, because I've noticed that if you show where your climber can fall, it's going to be an easier photo to look at. I'm sure that almost no one has really noticed that. Again, it's just like a random thing, little photo philosophy, if you will, that I've come up with. Just give your subject somewhere to go. Yeah, so I put this on the top there because I wanted to tie it in. Her next holds right here is a foot move, or I was going to shoot a hand move, but because of how I framed it all, I was like, well, it wouldn't make sense because you can't see where she's going. So might as well just make it a foot move. So it's kind of obvious she's looking at her foot, she's placing her foot. That's as far as my mindset goes. It's not really thinking about like, oh my, like where's she going next? Where's she going to fall? Like all that stuff. Yeah, and then in this one, it's just foreground and subject. There's not really a background because it just fades to black. But by having that fade to black in there, that was another way that I was trying to create some depth there. I'm pretty sure it was a bit lighter in there, but I ended up darkening it just because, yeah, I don't know. It just adds depth in kind of an interesting way. I think depth really makes a photo. I've said that a lot throughout this, but I really do think that that's a thing. So like having a foreground that leads in, or having a foreground that like blocks the boring part but is close to you, all of that, that's just going to add depth. The more layers that you have, the more like just somehow interesting your photo is. And I feel like by adding all those layers into your photo, it's just an easy way to know that you're going to come out with something good. I'd say that's like one big tip that I have for a lot of photographers, is just try to create some depth in your photo. I see a lot of people just kind of stand there. They look straight at the wall. They frame up their subject like perfectly around it. And so, wait, okay. So like, let's say if we have this, or let me try to find like a flatter photo. You can see I try to create a lot of depth. Okay, so this photo, let's say I shot it like that. Like it's not going to be that great. And the reason because is we essentially only have one dimension that we're working in. The photo looks flat. And so when we pull out, we now have something really close to us, something that leads to our subject. We have something behind our subject, even if it's just a little bit, and that'll just add some visual interest to your photos also. Yeah, that's random rambling on about my own photography there. I hope you guys enjoyed it somewhat. If you have any questions about any of these photos, feel free to leave a comment below or shoot me a message on Instagram at Jeff the Climber. And yeah, that's it.